You're watching Access Minnesota. Here's Jim Dubois.
If you shop at a major retail store, chances are the company knows your marriage status, how many kids or pets you have, where you live, your estimated salary, how many credit cards you have, and what websites you visit. Is this cause for alarm? Professor Gil Rodman explores the fine line between aggressive marketing and the privacy rights of consumers. Gil Rodman is an associate professor in communication studies at the University of Minnesota. He specializes in cultural and critical media studies. Professor Rodman, welcome to Access Minnesota.
Thanks for having me.
Marketing and advertising seem to be at a kind of crossroads right now as traditional media, print, radio, TV compete for ad dollars with online and social media. But before we get into the latest issues of online marketing, let's go back to the basics. How do advertisements get us to buy things?
Well, you know, that's a question that folks have been wrestling with for quite a while, and arguably no one knows that for sure. I mean, many advertisers will claim they've got good answers, and obviously some of it works. Because they do know that you advertise a product and sales will usually go up. I mean, unless the advertisement is just completely bad, and that unadvertised products don't see comparable boosts in sales. At the same time, one of the tricky questions is obviously that people will advertise for things, and most people who see ads don't buy them. You know, that how many people watch the Super Bowl? Millions of people watch the Super Bowl, and yet did not immediately rush out and buy Cadillacs or Bud Light or what have you. So the how can be tricky, and sometimes there are folks who would argue that the how is never as neat as you want to sell a car, and so you advertise the car and you can guarantee that particular people will buy the car. What you usually can figure out is that if you do a decent ad for a car, then your sales will go up. And then if you target your ad well, the sales are more likely to go up among a demographic you're targeting. But the specific hows, I think, do get messier precisely because there are all sorts of people who you're targeting who don't buy a new car. Or who don't buy your beer or your cola or your trip to Aruba or whatever you're pitching. Certainly part of it, though, is about trying to figure out who you think you want to buy your product or your service, and what you think they need or want, or what you think particular motivational buttons you can push for them are, and to try to link your product to that in advertising.
How ingrained is advertising in our everyday lives?
Certainly we are awash in advertising, and that is probably becoming much more prevalent sort of all the time. That we walk through, particularly if you live in an urban space. There are ads on buses, there are ads on the top of taxis, there are ads on the sides of buildings. That whole sort of realms of human activity that not that long ago would have been ad-free zones, simply by social custom, or because there would not have been an ability for advertisers to reach into them, now are filled with ads. Grade school textbooks, the sides of milk cartons, and so on and so forth. So some of it we are, there are ads all over the place, often in ways that we stop even thinking about as ads. We just think, well, that's just, that's what the city street looks like. That's the world we live in.
How is advertising adapted to online media and social networking?
I think one of the things that has happened, you see this a lot around things like Facebook and other forms of social media, is you do see ways in which these platforms, they are, I'll put this cynically, whether they're ever intended to be this or not, they are great market research tools. They're spaces where people say an awful lot about themselves and do so in semi-public fora. And so, if you use Facebook and you are a even moderate user of Facebook, you don't have to be a heavy, active user of Facebook, the odds are good that you have told the nice folks at Facebook, through the way you're using the site, through the things that you post, through the things you click on, all sorts of things about who you are in terms of demographics, who you are in terms of education, who you are in terms of products you buy, or music you listen to, or your politics. Simply because you were saying a lot of things and engaged in a lot of activity that you're doing in a space, a virtual space, but a space nonetheless, where this stuff is all sitting on servers attached to your name, or at least attached to something that you're pretending to be your name. And then again, at the level of the individual, you know, the nice folks, you know, on Madison Avenue may not really care a whole lot about Gil Rodman, Associate Professor of Communication Studies, but they may be really interested in knowing, well, what do 40-something sort of, you know, middle class, upper middle class professionals living in the upper Midwest, what do they drink? You know, and we can sort of aggregate my data along with those of the however many other people who fit whatever demographic slice they're looking at, and go, huh, I'm given sort of comments here about how he doesn't like this type of beer, and you know, he, you know, turns his nose up at this friend who says she drinks daiquiris, that we learn something that we, you know, otherwise would have to have paid, you know, people to come into a room and do questionnaires for, or try to, you know, trick them with, you know, sort of one-way mirror studies into, you know, turning up their noses at toilet paper or whatever might be marketed. So at that level, I think one of the adaptations is precisely the ways in which certain forms of online forums become really useful ways for them to gather data about people.
When Access Minnesota returns, more with Communication Studies Professor Gil Rodman.
Access Minnesota will return after these messages.